Hi, I'm Scott MacArthur, and welcome to Stage and Manner. Depends on what you're doing. So, in the years that I was a beat reporter covering the Blue Jays, the work was often done at the stadium, right? You're talking to the manager, John Gibbons at the time, coaches, players. You have contacts in front offices or agents. So the information that you get, the work that you do is not entirely dissimilar, but is different than when you are hosting a show. So if you're hosting a show, you're working in close concert with your producer on guests. You're counting on their contacts. You also have contacts of your own. In the time that I did the morning show on Sportsnet 590, The Fan, that even added a different wrinkle to it just because of the time that the show was on. So you have to factor in the need, for the sake of your own sanity, to have an afternoon nap. You also need to be awake and alert in the evenings, because that's when the games that you'll be talking about the next morning are being played. Sometimes a lot of what you're going to talk about tomorrow morning happens that evening. So whatever preparation that you are doing prior to the evening slate of games, it could all change. Be informative, be entertaining, teach the listener something that they may not otherwise know because they don't have the access you do or what have you. A lot of it really just is by existing. I'll always say a lot of it has to do with repetition. Some of it is osmosis, just by being around. Again, keeping in touch with your contacts, etc. Watching, observing, having insight offered to you by others, and developing your own that informs your impression of something that happens on the ice, the field, the court that night, that you can take to the air the next day, that is unique, hopefully, and drives a conversation. Where I'm not as strong, I'm not going to fake it. So then how do we get that information to the listener? Well, let the guest shine. So call the experts who are around the team every day, who are at the games, who have the contacts inside the organization, around the league, and let them paint that picture. I know what it is that I'm seeing, but I also could use a bit of an explanation and a more in-depth look at it too. I often say there are three different things. The first two are good, and the last one is when you get yourself into trouble. There's knowing what you know, there's knowing what you don't know, and when you get into trouble is when you don't know what you don't know. Because if you don't know what you don't know, you probably don't know how dumb you sound espousing what it is that you don't know. So you got to know what you know and know what you don't know. If you don't know what you don't know, then you're screwed. If you know what you don't know, you can compensate in other areas, bringing somebody else on or letting somebody else, if it's a multi-person show, carry the conversation and jump in where you feel comfortable, etc. That's the key. Know what you know and know what you don't know. And be aware, be self-aware, and be humble. Because a lot of people will be like, I gotta show what I know. You just made it very clear that you don't know. So don't protect your brand. Protect your brand. What am I mad at? And that may be too specific. What do I care about today? If you are a diehard sports fan who loves your market's sports teams, and by love I mean you've got to be objective and whatever, but that you're invested emotionally. If you care about the local sports teams, you're going to feel a way, whatever way that is, about last night's game, about the hot streak or the cold streak that they're on, about the performance of player A or player B. So there's just so many different things. You got to be able to rhyme that stuff off and trust your gut. So that's really it. I hate to say this, but if you do it a while, it's not as hard as it seems to have to go in a completely different direction than you were anticipating. And it always gets back to, what do I care about? Do I trust my judgment as a local sports person, fan, whatever, that what moves me would move the listener? If the answer to that is yes, chances are they're happy with what I'm happy about, they're pissed off with what I'm pissed off about, or maybe I'm pissed off at something that they disagree with me on, and that's going to evoke a different emotion from them. They may hate me instead of hating the world, but if they respect my opinion enough to keep listening even though they hate me right now, well, I've evoked that emotion out of them and they're going to stay with me. And maybe they're going to get even angrier or even sadder, or if they're in agreement, they're going to get happier, like whatever emotion it evokes. So you just got to be able to roll. I mean, and not panic. Don't freeze, have an opinion, you know what you believe in, say it. That's a good question, and a hard one for me to answer, because for most of my life, being on the air is where I felt most at home. I mean, combating nerves, I really think, especially when you're younger and you're just getting your feet wet, repetition is everything. Every on-air opportunity you have, you take. There is opportunity now. You can host a podcast. There's so many different social media vehicles where you can learn your craft in the way that the craft is now being presented. If you believe in what you're saying, the nerves won't be there. Again, repetition. It's the most boring answer, and it's an annoying answer, especially when you're young and looking for that repetition. But I would hope that that's an encouragement, because if you have it, or if you're trying to mold who you are as a broadcaster and you've got time to do that, and if you're in your late teens or early 20s, you've got time. If we're dealing with a sensitive subject, and God knows there's been a bunch of those in the sports world over the last 5 or 6 years, that's going to call for a certain tone. But that shouldn't have to be an act. When we're talking about the Leafs, I can get really intense about that because that team makes me mad a lot. When we're talking about the Blue Jays, we can have debates about their free agents, but my tone may be different today than it would have been 2.5 years ago when we were all excited, apparently, about Socrates Brito's handedness. So I can emote, like I can express my emotions in ways that accurately reflect how I feel. Cadence and inflection and all of that is really repetition. It's reflecting how you're feeling, and you get better at that as you go along, as you get more reps. It really just comes down to time, and the time that you take to get better. But I would just say, if you have goals, designs, hopes, dreams of being on the air, do not let a significant period of time go by now at your age when you are not on the air. You've got to be doing something, because every time you do something, it's a rep. And it may be hard in certain situations to get feedback or whatever, although there are ways to go about doing that as well. But just make sure that you're practicing. That's how you learn to inflect your voice and speak with the emotion, the accurate emotion you're feeling. done some TV up in Ottawa for the Rogers community TV station up there in the mid-2000s, hosting Ottawa 67's hockey. But I hadn't done a ton of it after that, prior to joining TSN. And in sports talk radio, you're doing 15, 18, 20 minutes in a segment. And on TV, your time is clearly more limited, especially if you're doing a story or a hit or whatever for SportsCenter or Sportsnet Central. And I can't remember where we were, but we were on the road, and I was talking to a producer back in Toronto at TSN, and they said to me, whatever the story was at the time, they said, we're going to give you a little extra time. We think this deserves a little extra time today. I'm a radio guy, right? So I'm thinking in 15 to 17 to 18 minute blocks. And typically what I had been doing for TSN was like 90 seconds to 2 minutes, whatever. And I said, oh, great, okay. So I'm thinking 4.5, 5 minutes, whatever it'll be. So I asked, like, what do you mean? What do you mean more time? Like, what are we looking at? And they go, you'll have about 2.5 minutes. So it was pretty much like somewhere between 30 and 60 seconds more than what I was used to, which for a radio guy who talks for a living, isn't a lot of time. So that is the biggest difference that I noticed between the two mediums, is that you need to be, in the form of television I was doing, you need to be clear, you need to be concise, you need to be comfortable, you need to get what it is you need to say out ASAP. There isn't any room, and I mean, there are different formats, so I'm not speaking specific to the medium entirely. I'm just talking about my own experiences. You need to get what it is you want to say out, and there are probably some clips and other elements to the story that come into that chew into the time as well. So you got to get to the point. In radio, you've also got to get to the point, but the point is the hook, and then you add the layers of the detail, the opinion, the conversation that you want to have to build out a 14, 15, 17, 18 minute segment. So it really is the degree to which you need to be concise, in my experience, that is the main difference between radio and TV. The answer to any question that is not demeaning and does not require you to compromise your dignity, your humanity, the answer to any question is yes. And I know the industry is changing, so I'm speaking perhaps a little old school here, although I'm sure, just given that live events are going on as much, if not more, than they did when I was breaking in, this still applies. Need you to work Saturday night into early Sunday morning because there's this and that going on and we need your help. But my friend's 21st birthday party is Saturday night and we're all going out. Sorry, do you want it? Do you want it, right? I mean, there are sacrifices that we make. So I've got a whole spiel, which I won't get into now, on paid internships versus unpaid internships. I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is if you are breaking in and you are employed and you are being paid and they need you in off hours and they come to you with a somewhat or totally last minute request and you're available, and you're pretty much available unless there's some kind of emergency or family situation or something going on, you gotta be there. You gotta be there. You gotta be agreeable. You gotta be good to work with. You want your reputation in that area to be stellar. And I don't mean that you compromise your values or anything like that or what truly matters to you, but you want to be respectful and you want to be respected because you're respectful. So treat people well. And it'll come back to you 100 times over. And in this industry, it's very small. So you guys will graduate, and there will be people working as far west as Vancouver, potentially as far east as St. John's, everywhere in between. And those people will get promoted, and hopefully you'll get promoted, and all of a sudden you're going to realize I've got a network from coast to coast. And because you've been good to them and they've been good to you, those relationships will be positive, and you may get a good word put in for you at a job that you're really hoping for, because you know somebody at that station or at that place that can put that word in. And you never know where all of those relationships go. So it's kind of cool that way. But it is a small industry, so just be active, be engaged, and be agreeable, especially in the early stages of your career.